Today we start our new read aloud. You are going to love this book. It's on my Kindle. It's called Deltora Quest. Look at that picture. Is that amazing? I'll read you what it says. Includes secret tales from the Deltora Book of Monsters. This is called Deltora Quest, The Forest of Silence. That's a pretty scary looking guy. Just like I talked about today in our mini lesson, there is a map for Deltora Quest, and I will take a picture of that for you and put it in our reading lesson assignment today so that you can follow along if you want. It's written by Emily Rada, and there are 5 books, and we'll probably only have time to read the first one, but then you'll really want to read the rest. It's amazing. Part 1, The Belt of Deltora. So it's in several parts, and chapter 1 is called The King. Remember that we'll probably be confused, just like the main character, for a little while. Don't worry. Jared stood unnoticed in the crowd thronging the great hall of the palace. He leaned against a marble pillar, blinking with tiredness and confusion. Make a picture of this. It was midnight. He had been roused from his bed by shouts and bells. He had pulled on his clothes and joined the crowd of noble folk surging toward the hall. "The king is dead," the people were whispering. "The young prince is to be crowned at once." Jared could hardly take it in. The king of Deltora, with his long plaited beard and his golden robes, had died of a mysterious fever that had kept him to his bed for the last few weeks. Never again would his deep, booming voice be heard in the hallways of the palace. Never again would he sit laughing in the feasting hall. King Alton was dead, like his wife, the queen before him. The fever had taken them both, and now Endon would be king, Jared thought. He shook his head, trying to make himself believe it. He and Endon had been friends since they were young children. But what a difference there was between them. For Endon was the son of the king and queen, the prince of Deltora, and Jared was the son of a trusted servant who had died in the king's service when Jared was only 4 years old. Jared had been given to Endon as a companion, so that the young prince would not be lonely. They had grown up together like brothers. Together they did their lessons in the schoolroom, teased the guards, and persuaded the cooks in the kitchens to give them treats. Together they played in the vast green gardens. The other children who lived in the palace, the sons and daughters of nobles and servants, kept to their own rooms in their own parts of the grounds. As was the palace custom, Jared and Endon never even saw them except in the great hall on feast days. But the 2 boys did what they could to entertain themselves. They had a secret hiding place, a huge hollow tree near the palace gates. There they hid from fussy old Min, their nursemaid, and Prandine, the king's chief advisor, a tall, thin, sour man they both disliked. They practiced archery together, playing a game called Aim High, where the first to shoot an arrow into the topmost fork of the hollow tree would win. The author is setting up a lot of important pieces here. The hollow tree, Prandine, their secret hiding place, playing the arrow game. They invented a secret code, and they used it to pass messages, jokes, and warnings to each other under the noses of their teachers, Min or Prandine. Jared would be hiding in the hollow tree, for example, because Min wanted him to take a dose of the fish oil medicine he detested. Endon would walk by and drop a note where he could reach it. You need to see what the note looks like. Do you see it in the middle? The message looked like nonsense, and no one in the palace could guess the meaning if they picked up the note by accident. But the code was simple. All you had to do to decode a message was write down all the letters in a line, leaving out EL wherever it appeared. So then, if you did that, you divided the letters into words, and it would say, "Do not go to the kitchens. Min is there." See how you would take out the EL? As Endon and Jared grew older, there was less time for games. Their days were filled with tasks and duties. Much of their time was spent learning the rule. Thousands of laws and customs by which the royal family lived. The rule governed their lives. They sat, Endon patiently and Jared not so patiently, while their long hair was plaited and twined with golden cord according to the rule. They spent hours learning to hammer red-hot metal into swords and shields. The first king of Deltora had been a blacksmith, and it was part of the rule that his art should be continued. Each late afternoon they had a precious hour of free time. The only thing they were not allowed to do was to climb the high wall that surrounded the palace gardens or go through the gates to the city beyond. For the Prince of Deltora, like the king and queen, never mingled with ordinary people. This was an important part of the rule. It was a part that Jared was sometimes tempted to break, but Endon, quiet, dutiful, and obedient, anxiously begged him not to even think of climbing the wall. "It's forbidden," he would say, "and Prandine already fears that you are a bad influence on me, Jared. He has told my father so. If you break the rule, you will be sent away, and I do not want that." Jared didn't want it either. He knew he would miss Endon sorely, and where would he go if he had to leave the palace? It was the only home he had ever known. So he tamed his curiosity, and the city beyond the wall remained as much a mystery to him as it was to the prince. The sound of the crystal trumpets broke into Jared's thoughts. He turned, like everyone else, towards the back of the hall. Endon was entering between 2 rows of royal guards in pale blue uniforms trimmed with gold. So the author has helped teach us a lot about how the world works here by having Jared have memories. That's a really good device for an author to use. So there are a lot of rules here. Poor Endon, Jared thought. He is grieving. He wished he could be beside his friend to comfort him, but he had not been summoned. Instead, Chief Advisor Prandine stalked at Endon's right hand. Jared looked at Prandine with dislike. The advisor looked even taller and thinner than usual. He wore a long purple robe and carried what looked like a box covered by a gold cloth. As he walked, his head poked forward so he looked like a great bird of prey. Are we supposed to like Prandine? No. Endon's eyes were shadowed with sadness, and he looked very small and pale in his stiff silver jacket with its high jeweled collar. But he held up his head bravely, as he had been taught to do. All his life he had been trained for this moment. "When I die, you will be king, my son," his father had told him so many times. "Do not fail in your duty." "I will not fail, father," Endon would answer him obediently. "I will do what is right when the time comes." But neither Jared nor Endon had thought the time would come so soon. The king was strong and healthy. It seemed like he would live forever. Endon had reached the front of the hall now and was mounting the steps to the platform. When he reached the top, he turned and faced the sea of faces. "He is so young," a woman near Jared breathed to her neighbor. "Shh," the neighbor warned. "He is the rightful heir." As she spoke, she glanced nervously in Jared's direction. Jared did not recognize her face, but he realized she knew him, and she feared that he might tell Endon that her friend had been disloyal. He looked away quickly. But now the crystal trumpets were sounding again, and a low, excited murmuring had begun in the crowd. Prandine had put his burden down on a small table beside the throne. He was sweeping the gold cloth aside to reveal a glass box. He was opening the box and taking out something that shone and glittered. The magic belt of Deltora. The crowd gave a hissing sigh, and Jared, too, caught his breath. He had heard about the belt since his earliest childhood, but he had never seen it before. And here it was, in all its beauty and mystery, the ancient object that for thousands of years had kept Deltora safe from the invasion by the evil Shadow Lord who ruled beyond the mountains. Hanging between Prandine's bony fingers, the belt seemed as delicate as lace, and the 7 huge gems set along its length looked like beautiful decorations. But Jared knew that the belt was made of the strongest steel, and that each of the gems played its own special part in the magic that protected Deltora. There was the topaz, symbol of faithfulness, gold as the setting sun. There was the amethyst, symbol of truth, purple as the violets that grew by the banks of the river Dell. For purity and strength, there was the diamond, clear and sparkling as ice. For honor, the emerald, green as lush grass. There was lapis lazuli, the heavenly stone, midnight blue with pinpoints of silver like the night sky. There was the ruby for happiness, red as blood, and the opal, symbol of hope, sparkling with all the colors of the rainbow. The crowd seemed to hold its breath as Prandine bent to loop the belt around Endon's waist. The advisor's fingers fumbled with the fastening, and he was standing well back. He almost seems afraid, Jared thought curiously. I wonder why. Then suddenly the fastening snapped closed, and his question was answered. Prandine sprang backwards. There was a crackling sound, and at the same moment the belt seemed to explode with light. The gems blazed like fire, lighting the hall with their rainbow brilliance. The people cried out and turned away, hiding their eyes. Endon stood with his arms upraised, almost hidden by the flashing, darting light. No longer was he just a boy with sad eyes. The magic belt had recognized him as the true heir to the throne of Deltora. He and he alone could now use its mystery, magic, and power. But will Endon use them? Jared thought suddenly. Did his father use them? Did his father ever do anything but follow the rules laid down years ago? He watched as the fires of the gems slowly died to a winking glow. He watched as the young king took off the belt and handed it to Prandine. He watched as Prandine, smiling now, put it back in its glass case. Jared knew what would happen to the belt now. As the rules stated, it would be carried back to the topmost room of the palace tower. The door of the room would be locked with 3 gold locks. 3 guards in gold uniforms would be put outside the door, and then life would go on as before. Prandine and the other government officials would make all the real decisions affecting the kingdom. The king would attend ceremonies and feasts, laugh at clowns and acrobats in the great hall, practice archery and the blacksmith's art. He would sit for hours while his hair and one day his beard were plaited. He would sign endless documents and stamp them with the ring that bore the royal seal. He would follow the rule. In a few years he would marry a young woman chosen for him by Prandine, a daughter of one of the noble families, who had also spent her life inside the palace walls. They would have a child to take Endon's place when he died, and that child would also wear the belt only once, before it was locked away again. Now, for the first time in his life, Jared wondered if this was a good idea. For the first time, he wondered how and why the belt was made. For the first time, he began to doubt the wisdom of letting such a power for good remain idle in a tower room while the realm it was supposed to protect lay unseen outside high walls. He slipped unnoticed out of the great hall and ran up the stairs to the palace library. This was another first for him. He had never loved to study, but there were things he needed to know, and the library was the only place where he was likely to find them out. It's awesome, isn't it? Oh, it gets so good. You're going to love this book. It's a quest. We don't exactly know what he's searching for. Right now, answers, I think. Okay, talk to you soon.